meeting of the Area Planning Committee. My name's Councillor Hollier. I chair the committee. For the benefit of our sort of public viewers today, the rest of the committee are sort of the furthest people towards that end. Towards this end, we've got lots of council officers, but if people could sort of identify themselves when they first speak, that would be really helpful. We have 3 items on the agenda today. Similarly, just for the benefit of people watching, we start with a presentation by the officers, then an opportunity for members of the committee to ask any questions they might have. We'll then sort of hear from our public speakers, and similarly there'll be an opportunity for members to ask a question of each public speaker as we go. After that, another opportunity for members to ask questions of officers just basically on what we've just heard. And following that, we move into debate and hopefully come to a decision. With that said, then I think we can move on to the agenda. So if I could ask I'll just say first, apologies and substitutes. We have apologies from Councillor Craghill, Councillor Orrell and Councillor Daubney, and Councillor Webb is substituted by Councillor Lomas. I think that's everybody. Seems to be. Move on then to declarations of interest. If I could ask if any member has any. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the interest of complete transparency, I should point out that on item 6, 29 Stationer Road, one of the people who is objecting is my nephew. However, he's also the ward councillor for the area. He's objecting in that capacity. He has no personal interest, so I don't think that's in any way prejudicial interest for me on the vice of officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perrott.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention on item 7, it was called in by Councillor Webb, who's my partner. This is declared in my register of interests, and we've not discussed the case in any way, but I did want to, again, in the interest of transparency, make this clear at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. I think that seems to be all of them. Minutes of the last 2 meetings. So we've got minutes from the 10th of June and the 8th of July. I've got a change requested by Fulford Parish Council to the minutes of the 8th of July, which I'll read out. But firstly, does anybody have any comments on the 10th of June minutes, or are we happy for me to sign them? Councillor Galvin. Oh, right, I'm sorry. Yeah, fantastic. With those. So just on the Fulford School item on the public speakers, minutes currently say Councillor Mary Imston spoke in support of the application, whereas what I think we wanted to say was that she spoke in objection to the application. They've also provided some slightly amended wording to the rest of the paragraph, which I'll just briefly read. So Councillor Urmston, on behalf of Fulford Parish Council, spoke in objection to the application. She explained that the Parish Council was unable to support the expansion due to serious concerns about the loss of trees, harm to public amenity and the access arrangements. So that would just replace the relevant part of that paragraph. Let's assume we're all happy with that. Seem to be. Great. So I'll sign those 2 at the end of the meeting. So we have no speakers under the general remit of the committee. So I think we can move straight on to the plans list. And the first item is Bright Beginnings Nursery, which is 47 Rawcliffe Drive. And Becky, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Becky, Head of Planning and Development Services. The first item is Bright Beginnings Day Nursery. I'm just going to quickly run through this for members. So the application site is outlined in red there. So that's the block plan as proposed. This is, you can see the block plan as existing. So you can, I don't know how clear it is. There you can see there's already an offshoot to the rear of the property. And then as proposed, the grey area is the size of the extension. It should be noted at this point that there has been considerable reduction in the proposal since the original application was submitted. So this is just for an extension to the kitchen now. You can see this is the existing nursery here. And again, from the other angle, and that's the next one. By way of, there's a brief update. Councillor Smalley did call the application in. However, he's been in touch to say he understands that there's been considerable alteration since the application was first submitted, and agrees the impact on amenity is much reduced, and he now has no objections to the proposal. From me, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any initial questions, Councillor Melly?
Thank you, Chair. On page 17 of our papers, paragraph 5.7, it says the dimensions of the proposed development. I was just wondering how much bigger that is than the existing section of the building that would be demolished.
I think, well, I've given the rear projection, so currently there is a small extension that finishes level with the property, and then we're extending about 2.3 metres further. I mean, I think as an extension, I'm trying to find the plans now, put them at the end. I mean, it's about doubling what's there, isn't it? I think, looking at the plan.
Okay, Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Public protection requested a condition about kitchen odours, but I couldn't see that in the proposed conditions. Was it considered not necessary or not reasonable? Or
I'm not really sure it's necessary for a kitchen of this size and this kind of use. I'm not sure it would be all that much different to a household kitchen, but I think we could put one on if you thought it was necessary.
Okay. Any further questions? No. I should say as well, we don't have any public speakers on this item. So we do move then straight into any more questions. And if not, we can move into debate. Councillor Fisher.
Bearing in mind that the application was called in by Councillor Smalley and now has removed his objections, I can't, and it's been modified. Had it been the 6 babies and the necessity for extra parking, I would have had some real issues, but I can't see a problem with it, and I'll move approval.
Thank you. Anybody willing to second that? Councillor Crawshaw.
Yeah, happy to second.
Okay, that's great. Any further debates? Can't see any. So able to conduct the name vote, please. Sorry, we'll just go to Becky just to confirm the.
Yeah, the recommendation as is on page 18 with the conditions 1, 2, 4. Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna indicate if you're for, against, or abstaining. So, Councillor Crawshaw.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Galvin.
For.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Melly.
for?
Councillor Perrott.
For.
Councillor Wardby.
For.
And Councillor Hollier.
For.
Thank you.
Okay, so that is approved. I think we're happy then to move straight on to item 6, which is Cedar House, Haxby.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is an existing single-storey dwelling. No, it's not a single-storey dwelling, it's an existing dwelling. And it's for conversion of the existing house into 2 dwellings with a single-storey rear extension, side and rear dormers, a rear extension, demolition of garage, and an erection of new dwelling to rear. I will talk you through these on this plan that is coming next. So that you can see to the just above where the architect's symbol is, there's 2 cars. That's the front of the property there. There is then a dotted line that shows where the existing property is to be separated. You can then see an extension to the rear of that property. And then the offshoot that will be transferred to a single dwelling, and in the access, you can see is the 2 blue, the initial 2 blue vehicles. Then after that, in the rear garden area, there is a single storey dwelling with a turning circle and parking to 2 properties there. So you can just see the existing access off Station Road for will be used for the segregated dwelling and the completely new dwelling. So that's the existing footprint. And they're the proposed elevations. You can see to the rear, the single story rear extension, you can see it, that's depends which way you're looking at it. If you're looking at that one, top left is you can see the dormers and the single story extension. And then again, the dormer on the existing roof in the middle one. And I'm just trying to see, and again, you can see on the west elevation, the single story extension on there as well. And then the single story dwelling elevations, you can see it is single story. There's no pitched roof to it there. And these are your floor plans. You can see the division of the 2 properties. And members saw this site from Tuesday, this virtual visit. You can see this is 29 Station Road. This is from the main road looking towards the application site. You can see where the dormer window is existing on the neighbouring property. There will be one down the side elevation there as proposed. And that's the access lane down the side, 29. The rear of Cedar House, you can see that's where the proposed single story extension will be and where the dwelling will be subdivided. And that is a satellite view. I'll leave it on that one because it's probably quite easy to see from there. There is an update to condition 9, which adds further wording with regard to the passing places to make sure that they're implemented and retained and maintained. There has also been additional representations which we've attached to the back of the additional information sheet. That's from a neighbouring property, which gives significant detail about their concerns, especially highway safety and ownership. And then there is their title deeds as part of that. We've also got the council's legal officer opinion with regard to the ownership, which I'll summarise, but it says we often receive representations on planning applications concerning not a planning matter, but a personal interest or civil dispute, and that is what the ownership is considered to be. However, planning permission can be granted for a proposal that is subject to some restrictive covenant or control by a third party. So given that, we can only give it, can't be given weight in terms of your planning considerations of this application. But I'd suggest you that in more detail. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just give members a couple of moments just to absorb that, and then we can move on to.
Sorry, Chair, where's the extra information? I don't appear to have a copy of it, unfortunately. Sorry. Thank you.
think if we're happy then to move on, I think Councillor Wardby and then Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. There seems to be some concerns around access on Ash Lane. Please, can you tell me what the previous access was on Ash Lane and the numbers of the vehicles and how many more vehicles you'd expect with this application? And do you feel that with passing places, it would make vehicle access acceptable and safe?
I'll do the first bit, then I'm going to pass to Helen. The first bit in terms of there is an existing access to the rear of the property where cars can park now. You can't see it on there. Just a second, let me see if I can find it on plan for you. No, helpfully, sorry, I haven't got a plan of it for you. But there is existing access to the rear of the property. There is a gate now, so there is rear access for the property as it stands now. So this is an additional. And I'm going to pass it on to the rest of it.
Hello, my name is Helen Berger. I'm the Traffic and Highway Development Manager for City of York Council. So one additional property would be the answer, so 1 or 2 cars, depending on how many cars people own. Then we've obviously got the existing house with parking at the front, and then the separation from the main building would have access at the back as well, with I guess 1 or 2 cars, but yeah, that's pre-existing. So in terms of the impact, obviously it will mean a few more cars up and down the lane, but the threshold that we would have to meet to object to such an increase is it would have to be a significant or an unacceptable impact on safety, and we don't think that 1 extra dwelling would meet that threshold. So I think it's not ideal. I'm happy to recognise that, but not unsafe.
Okay, Councillor Wardby.
So you've are the passing places, are they new or were they there before?
No, they're new. So we discussed with the applicants to make sure that it would improve traffic, and maybe if people are walking on the lane, or to ensure that there's a space for the cars to get to the side.
Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused about this issue about the ownership of the land that constitutes part of the access road. And I just can't marry up the diagram that we've been given, which is the land registry title plan in the additional documents, with, for example, the site plan showing parking and turning on page 49. Are you able to show me which bit?
So can you see? If you look up now, I know it's quite, you might have to go closer to see it, but if you look up there, you can see the property that corresponds to this, to the title one that you've got. You can see where it says Cedar Court there in relation to where the new property is going to go and where the application says.
But on page 49, we've got a more detailed, close site plan showing parking and turning, and I don't know.
Right, okay, yeah. So if you look at where it says 29 on this title deed,
yeah,
that is the main property with the 2 car parks in front of it, that where there's going to be the extension, and then the road that runs to the, which way is it? To the east of that is the one that you can see on the title deed there.
Yeah, so what I'm asking is this little sticky out bit in red on the title plan.
Yeah.
Where's that on the diagram on page 49?
That is.
Sorry, I know that's not very technical language,
It's
but
fine, don't worry. So that is. Let me work that out for you. Yeah, so you see where there's 2 trees, isn't there?
yeah.
And then it will be around about the 3rd and 4th tree, round about the 4th tree, I would say, is where that comes along.
That's not at the bottom.
No, top.
At the top. Okay.
Hang on. It depends which way you're looking at it. This is
As my paper is.
As your paper is, it's at the bottom, the 4th one to the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
you. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. This update to condition 9, prior to the occupation, the passing place at the entrance dash lane should be implemented and clearly marked. How, from the site visit, it looked like it was gravel. How would it be marked, and how can it, how can we ensure that it will be clearly marked in perpetuity?
Should I take it? So obviously it's been conditioned, so we would have to agree the detail, but I would imagine probably a change of material. So maybe some paving or something like this to show the area, and then probably a sign of some sort on the property, or to say that this is a passing place. Obviously it's private, so it wouldn't be highway signage, but something like that.
Councillor Melly, a follow-up. Councillor Fisher and then come back.
Thank you, Chair. Apart from the amendments to condition 9, I'm also slightly concerned about the aspect of using the turntable. It says that the turntable shall be installed as shown on the diagram drawing, which is a way of making sure cars can turn around and go out in 4 gear. Is there any way we can enforce that they always have to do with that? Is there any way we just, would it be possible for them to just reverse out anyway?
Just a second. Which condition, sorry?
To use the turntable to come out in 4 gear.
How would we
enforce the condition to make sure that they always use the turntable to come out in 4 gear? There's nothing that we can do as an authority, as far as I'm concerned, that would insist that they actually use the turntable. We can insist it's installed, but we can't insist they actually use it, because it is possible to go into that access and reverse out.
Yes, is a simple answer, but it's whether or not if that was done for one dwelling, would that be enough to recommend refusal on this application? And the answer is probably no.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melly, and then I'll come to Councillor Wardby.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really sorry, I still don't completely understand this land ownership thing, because I know this sort of thing has come up before, and granting planning permission doesn't override other legal or statutory process or whatever, but planning conditions have to be reasonable and enforceable, and if having a condition which involves some sort of development or use that isn't possible, or that involves someone else's land, then surely that means that we can't enforce it as a planning condition.
Well, the conditions as they're being written are enforceable, and they're within the red line boundary of the application site. So there's no, it's then whether or not it can move forward legally rather than in planning. So in planning terms, what they've proposed is acceptable. It's within the red line, and we've conditioned it in order to mitigate any impact. So we're satisfied from a planning point of view that and with highways that the proposal is acceptable. Your question is about whether or not it's within the ownership is something outside of the planning process.
Yeah, Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. From your answer to my question, you seem to suggest that what is being shown here in terms of the turning and access wouldn't go into the area that's bounded by red on the additional information. So it wouldn't use that land that's owned by the objectors who live at number 2 Cedar Court, from what you said to me, but have I misunderstood that?
Well, the information that we have in terms of the turning in and out of the site shows that it wouldn't be needed. I can't say that it won't be used by accident, or I can't say that definitely, but from the information that we have from a highways point of view, they can get in and out of that site in the manoeuvres shown on this plan. Helen, is there anything you're not contradicting me? Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wardby.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise, Becky, but I I'm just looking at the objection letter and it says about, and it's probably the same question, but I don't understand it. Could you explain it a bit? It says the turning head circle is owned by number 1 and number 2. The planning officer has no right to say that the passing places of the turning head at Cedar Court could be used for a shelter. I just don't understand, like how. Yeah, thank you.
No, so from the information we have on the plan in front of you, there's a passing place at the front of number 29 going to be implemented, and there's a passing place just where the first set of blue cars are. That's where the passing place will be. That from the information we have, that's in the red line. So that can be, so this is not talking about any legal issues, but from that we've looked at it, and if that was implemented, that would be acceptable in terms of planning and highways. And that's why we've made the recommendation from the information we have that is acceptable. But that's not taking into account who owns what, because that's not part of the planning process.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Melly? I'll come to Councillor Fisher.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question about bin storage, because it looks like waste collection would be at the very front of the property. But is that where bin storage is as well between collections? Is there bin storage out the back of the property and then they get wheeled down the lane?
It looks like that it is storage for collection, yeah. And then the actual bin storage would be in each of the individual, there's more than enough room within each of the individual properties to get the bins out and round. So if you look at the property that will remain 29, you can see there's a passageway for them to get out their bins around the side. The one that is that will be the offshoot, there's plenty of space within there. You can see that there's plenty of space. And then the new one, the new single story dwelling, there's sufficient space around there to get bin storage in there. So there is no concern. That is just where they will be stored for collection, but then they'll be in each individual plot during the week.
Councillor Fisher? And then I'll come. Yeah, okay. Back to Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. My other question is about cycle storage, because I couldn't quite make out on the plans in the papers or on screens where cycle storage is. And condition 11 only says that areas for parking manoeuvring of cycles need to be in place if shown in the plans.
On the plan showing the cars and where they park on the turning table, there's these rectangles that you can see. My understanding is that's what they are. Obviously, we can't quite read it. Well, I can't read it for sure. But that's what they are when we looked at the more, well, when we were able to zoom on the plans. So obviously the detail needs to be agreed. That's why it's conditioned. But
Okay, Councillor Melly.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is my final question. In the report, it says that buyer services were consulted and didn't object to proposals. Did they know at the time that the passing places might also be used for parking, which would make the lane narrower at the time that there is parking there? Or were they only looking at the plans thinking that that would only be a turning place with moving traffic?
They've been consulted on the information that they have there. So it's a passing place. It's not for parking in those spaces. So, but it's the same situation that there is there now with the existing properties down the end of the lane being able to get to. Do you see what I mean? The fire vehicles would have the same issue with the ones that there's 2 there now. Well, 3 if you count the one that's using the rear access.
The report says, in response to concerns about parking, that the parking places could be used for visitor parking and vehicles stopping for deliveries and that sort of thing, which, while the parking place is being used by a stationary vehicle, unoccupied stationary vehicle, would make it narrower than if it was just being used as a parking place. Is that make sense. And I'm wondering if emergency vehicles could get through if there was a parked vehicle in the passing place, potentially a van, you know, if it's a delivery.
Well, emergency services were consulted obviously on the width available. So at the moment, people could leave a car in the lane, and that could happen in the future. Actually, if it was left in the passing place, it would be better than currently on the lane. Yeah, they didn't have any issues. So yes, of course, there could be a vehicle obstructing, but like in any streets or New York, they would get through. I think that's what they tell us usually, somehow. So yeah.
Okay. I've got a question as well. It's just on 5.12, where it says, however, following previous refusals on this site, it was considered that a smaller, more modest dwelling would be better suited to the plot with a reduced height so as to reduce impact. I was just wondering what the context of that consideration was. Was it a sort of appeal decision or sort of informal sort of conversations with the...
No, there was a 2003 application that was refused and dismissed at appeal, and that's taken from the comments of the inspector's comments about because they obviously found it to be unacceptable. So that's taken into consideration the inspector's comments, and that's where that's come from.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I can't see any further questions, so I think we can move on then to our public speakers. Our first public speaker is Miss Diane Flowers. If you're able to take a seat, sorry, it's a very long table, but
right.
Thank you. Yeah, and you've got 3 minutes, I'm sure they've said, to address the committee.
Thank you.
And at the end, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions, but if you'd like to make a start, yes.
I've resided at 25 Station Road for the past 38 years. The planning application in relation to the proposed bungalow is governed by the available garden space of 29 Station Road, which is now to be shared by 3 developments: a 5-bedroomed house, a 4-bedroomed, and a new bungalow. The bungalow would be out of character in relation to the surrounding homes in terms of size, scale, and form. It totally ignores the influence it will have on its surroundings and interaction of adjoining homes. The function of a residential development is to provide a pleasant environment, and this application is detrimental to this function. The City of York Design Guide is being ignored in respect of integrating with its landscape setting. It is crammed into a small garden plot with a 1-metre strip of garden area on some elevations. The majority of usable outdoor garden space has, through necessity, been allocated to parking and a turning space. It ignores the recommendation that new properties should benefit new residents, adjacent occupiers, and existing communities. The access lane has been the principal reason for numerous past refusals, and this application will double the amount of the current use and that of previous refused applications. The City of York Design Guide states that it is not the case of what the site can do for the development, but what the development can do for the surroundings. The site can provide an overdevelopment, noise and light pollution from vehicles entering and leaving the site to the neighbouring properties. The proximity of the proposed bungalow flies in the face of legalities of right to light from the dining room window of my home. The plans indicate a view of the sky will be available above the construction, affording a reduction in light, but this hardly compensates for the light experienced at present from a relatively small window. To conclude, previous planning applications and appeals to the inspectorate have been refused for a bungalow to be built on a larger plot of land at the rear of 29 Station Road, stating that it would be out of keeping with its surroundings, and now there is a recommendation for a bungalow to be built on a much smaller plot of land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just ask if the committee have got any questions. can't see any. So I'll just thank you for coming to speak to us this evening, and we'll take your comments into account as we sort of debate this item shortly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We could move on then to Mr. Richard Bailey, who's speaking against as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, make a start in your own time.
Thank you. My wife and I own 2 Cedar Court, Haxby. Ash Lane is a narrow, undeveloped lane accessed off Station Road, leading down to Cedar Court, a turning circle of which there are 2 properties. Our objections are as a result of significant errors in the planning officer's report, as well as notable omissions. Under 5.21, the officer encourages visitors and delivery drivers to trespass on our land, as we own part of Ash Lane and the turning circle, by advising them to park there. This is our land. Also, our title deeds state that the turning circle and the jointly used part of Ash Lane must be kept clear and unobstructed at all times. Again, 5.21 and part of 5.19 of the report is incorrect. You cannot reduce the size of the lane. Even we are not allowed to park there. The proposed new properties have no provision for visitors and deliveries to turn round in their own land and rely on using the turning circle. Otherwise, they would have to reverse back down the narrow lane onto Station Road, with all the issues this would create for other vehicles and pedestrians, including parents and children going to the nearby primary school. It has not been established that the new properties have a right to use the turning circle. Under 1.4 and 5.24, no consideration seems to have been given to some of the other previous council refusals of developments on this site. Not referred to is the following another council refusal for development. An appeals inspector from the Department of Environment and Transport was appointed who upheld the council's decision of refusal due to concerns over the access from Station Road, with the inspector adding that the traffic conditions prevailing on Station Road are unsatisfactory, and he found it extremely difficult and a dangerous manoeuvre to exit the existing site on completion of his inspection. This was not simply due to the lane being unable to accommodate additional vehicle movements. The council has been consistent over the years in refusing numerous applications to develop the site involving access from Station Road, and have seen this refusal vindicated at appeal. There has been no change to the site access from Station Road over the years, only an increase in traffic on Station Road. There is no pedestrian footpath at all along Ash Lane, which is only 2.9 metres at its narrowest point, and the danger for those of us wishing to walk into Haxby Centre will only be increased as a result of the additional traffic. We would ask the committee, as they have done on many previous occasions, to refuse this application, as it seems flawed in many ways and is not legally possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. I can't see any either. So similarly, thank you for your time this evening. And we'll take your comments into account.
Thank you very much.
As we move forward. If we could hear from Mr. Paul Lee next, who's speaking in support as the owner. Thank you. And if you may be able to make a start in your own time.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak at today's meeting. I'd like to start by thanking Elizabeth and the planning team who we have worked with throughout this application. I'd also like to thank the Highways Department who have provided valuable direction with regards to the access, which we have welcomely incorporated into the plans, most notably adding 2 passing places, which improves visibility and ensures the safety of all future users. We understand that some of our neighbours are nervous about the proposal, and I can assure you that this has been at the forefront of our minds when considering all aspects of the design. And we hope that you agree that this is a sympathetic, minimal impact design, making best use of space by dividing the existing house at the logical point and the introduction of a flat roof bungalow to minimise impact on the surroundings. The proposal represents change, but change is not the same as harm. Access is a common theme of concern, so I'd like to say a few words in relation to this. Our family have lived here over 5 years, and in our time we have never had cause for concern, no near misses and no reports of incident involving vehicles or pedestrians. If concerns are around emergency vehicles, I can confirm that large waste and recycling lorries occasionally use the access to collect from 1 and 2 Cedar Court. Usage by vehicles would continue to be extremely low, and the low volume is supported in a previous Secretary of State appeal report where it says the additional traffic generated by an additional dwelling would not be great. It also goes on to say visibility at the junction with Station Road is good, and it is immediately adjacent to a school safety zone where a 20 miles per hour speed limit applies and is therefore a stretch of highway where drivers are already adopting a cautious approach. It has also been said that vehicles will be required to reverse onto Station Road. This is simply a misconception. There is a 280 square metre turning head at the end of the drive known as Cedar Court, which is communal for all vehicles to use. And this arrangement has been legally binding since 1968. Vehicles will therefore safely exit the drive onto Station Road in a forward gear. Whilst I appreciate everyone's entitled to make an objection, I'd just like to highlight that the powers at number 2 Cedar Court, who are responsible for over half of the objections, sold their property earlier in the year and now live in South Yorkshire. The property sits vacant and has been purchased knowing there is planning pending to be decided by committee. I'd like to conclude by saying that we have incorporated all of the recommendations made by the council, and we trust you will now feel able to support the planning officer in their recommendation to approve. Thank you for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. No, I can't see any, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Move on then to Councillor Ed Pearson, speaking in objection. If you'd like to start in your own time.
Good evening, members. Thank you for your time this evening to consider this planning application for the subdivision of 29 Station Road into 2 dwellings and the construction of a 3rd new dwelling on the grounds. I've called this application in on behalf of several local residents who have quite legitimate and very serious concerns about the appropriateness of this development. I very rarely comment on planning applications, and I can count on the fingers of one hand how many applications I've objected to in the last 2.5 years of being a ward councillor. It's not something I do lightly. I hope you will have seen on my PowerPoint presentation, which I circulated to members of the committee yesterday afternoon, and which I hope provides a visual understanding of the reasons behind my objections. Firstly, I am not in principle against the subdivision of the dwelling into 2 houses. Number 29 Station Road is a very large house with large gardens. However, the application before you tonight sets about dividing the house and grounds in a way which is totally inappropriate and out of character with the local area, as the subdivided dwelling to the rear and the proposed new single-storey dwelling would not benefit from any notable outdoor garden amenity space. They do not have any garages, off-street parking would be incredibly tight and dangerous, and there is no suitable on-street parking or waiting areas for visitors and deliveries to take place or turn around on Ash Lane itself. This is inconsistent with and out of character with homes in the local area, which usually do have garages and off-street parking and do have large gardens to both the front and rear. The proposed new housing plots are cramped and crowded and close to neighbouring properties, which is overbearing and could be considered to constitute overdevelopment. Secondly, as explained in my objection comments, this proposal is the latest in a long string of rejected applications for more houses on Ash Lane, which have all been rejected by previous iterations of both this committee and Rydale District Council committees and various secretaries of state. They can't all have been wrong. This is all largely down to the narrow and completely inappropriate access lane known as Ash Lane. As I stated in my objection comments, this lane was not deemed appropriate for more than 3 dwellings way back in 1968. And with rising car ownership and traffic levels, this situation can only have become worse over the last 54 years. I've outlined how the lane contravenes virtually every guideline within section 8.8 of the City of York Council Highways Design Guide on shared driveways, which I believe should be upheld. As why do we have these guidelines if we don't intend to stick to them? The conclusion can only be that the access lane is not suitable and is indeed unsafe, with absolutely no refuge for pedestrians, no way that 2 vehicles can pass safely. 2 cars cannot pass in the passing place. And indeed, blind reverse moves into Ash Lane would be almost guaranteed, with backlogs likely reaching into Station Road. With this being a busy main road in close proximity to a primary school with heavy footfall, this is totally unacceptable. I urge this committee to reject this application for the reasons I have set out. It is quite simply dangerous. Many thanks.
Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee have any. Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Do you know, do any vehicles currently turn at the end of this lane, like for waste collection services from 1 and 2 Cedar Court or deliveries and that sort of thing?
I'd have to check, but I believe that the bins are taken down Ash Lane itself because the lorries can't go, the big bin lorries cannot go down. The only people who are allowed to turn around are the 1 and 2 Cedar Court and number 29 itself.
But do you know, kind of the deliveries, the kind of thing you get delivered to your door?
So, my understanding is that the deliveries would obviously come down. You can get a Ford Transit van down there, but you can't. If a Ford Transit van goes down there, you can't get a mobility scooter back up. It just isn't appropriate.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Thank you then, Councillor Pearson. If we can move on then to any further questions to officers. Councillor Wardby was very quick.
Thank you, Chair. I have one final question about this access road. So I've read in 1.4 that at least 4 of these applications that were refused about the access. Can you tell me what has changed that you find it, that you want to approve it, you want us to approve this? The recommendation is to improve anyway, because on all of them it's refused due to the long access of the drive. So were the passing spaces put into all those applications, or is this a new thing? And that's what I just want to make it completely clear so I know.
So the passing places were not offered in the previous applications. Also, one of the applications that was mentioned by one of the speakers was for a 13-bed nursing home. So a lot more traffic. So that's, yeah, and the latest appeal decision, the inspector actually mentioned that they didn't think there was an issue with highway safety for an extra dwelling.
From our point of view, that since they were originally refused, there's been a significant change in planning policy since then as well. So that's just for your consideration that we have changed planning policy since then. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Fisher, and then I'll come to Councillor Melly.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you about the, on page 28, the final planning application, which is 03/04114/full. It says dismissed May 2005 due to overdevelopment of the site only. Would you not agree that the planning inspector, and I'll quote what he said that it seems to this would give the appearance of a small, tightly knit cluster of development rather than individual dwellings, each contained within its own spacious plot. Would you not agree that the planning inspector implied that the plot that was being provided for that application was not just too small for the dwelling, but also too small to be to fit comfortably in the surroundings compared to the other dwellings around there?
That was his opinion, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about what permitted development rights there would be if it was approved, because I think there's a condition that says dwellings 2 and 3 wouldn't have any permitted development rights, but that PD rights would remain for dwelling 1. So I was just wondering what the potential implications of that are. Does that mean that in the future there could be an extension or another dormer or something that would increase the number of bedrooms and therefore the amount of cars that there might be at the property and that sort of thing? That could change the situation in the future.
And we can't put a dormer window to the front without requiring planning permission, so that would require planning permission. The only space to the rear, they're putting an extension on as part of this proposal, so if you go above that, that would require planning permission. So basically why we haven't is because there isn't really anything else that they could do without needing planning permission, hence why we haven't taken the PD rights off.
So this would exhaust all the permitted development rights, basically. There wouldn't be any remaining anyway.
Say that again.
So there wouldn't be any permitted development rights remaining anyway. This kind of
No,
exhausts
they would have
all.
them, but it doesn't mean to say they could actually implement the PD rights. Does that make sense? So say I could have PD rights on my house, but I couldn't actually implement them due to various reasons. Do you see? That's not very well explained. Apologies. We're not taking the PD rights off, but it doesn't mean to say that they could actually implement anything under their PD rights, because there is no way of doing anything there. I think that's where we've got to with that one. Because the site is very, the dwelling that's left is constrained in terms of what it could do under permitted development rights. And they could still do outbuildings to the rear, because there is still that long garden to the rear. But would it be reasonable to remove their PD rights for that? Not necessarily, given the size of the, but if members considered that, we could potentially remove PD rights if we felt that was necessary. It's not unreasonable to do that.
Councillor Melly?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that makes sense. I understand that. I have a different question about highways in the highways network management response on page 30, paragraph 3.2. It says, on receipt of further information and drawings, officers consider the issues raised have been addressed. And I took that to mean that there'd been, like more information provided and clarification, but not necessarily changes. But then on page 38, paragraph 5.22, it says that amendments have been made to the application. So I was just wondering if that could be clarified, if amendments actually have been made or not. And if there have been amendments, what they were, like what were the original concerns, and in what way do the amendments address those concerns?
So the changes, there were changes to drawings, and the changes were the passing places. And also the design of the car parking for each of the new dwellings, so that we could ensure that the cars could turn around, exit in a forward facing manner. So these were the changes that were made to the drawings and the application that alleviated our concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw?
Thanks, Chair. I just had a question about light. I think one of the objectors was from the property at number 25, which is next to the flat roof dwelling. And I just wanted to understand the sort of relationship between them, because on the drawings on page 52, the far left-hand drawing, that neighbour's window that's noted there, I presume is the same window as that's then discussed in paragraph 5.15 on page 36, which I think is the living room window. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more. It looks to me like effectively the two dwellings would be built very close to the boundary of each other with a reasonably high fence in between. The impact on the light is saying that it would be not considered so harmful that refusal would be justified in this instance. Is that because the existing boundary fence is already having an impact on the light? And if it was talking about building two buildings as close together as that, you might otherwise have a concern? Or is it that actually it's far enough away, it's not impacting significantly in and of itself to be of any concern? Does that, I phrase that in the right way?
No, I think it's both. I think, yes, you have to take into consideration the existing boundary, but then you also have to weigh up that, yeah, it will have some form of an impact, but it won't it's not considered to be, given the information we have, to a sufficient degree to allow us to recommend refusal. So it's both. You've got to take the boundary wall into consideration that's there now that has an impact. So yes, has an impact. And then implementing the single story extension, yes, it will have an impact, but it's not to a greater degree on top of the boundary wall that we'd be confident in recommending refusal.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question from me. The width of the passing place, am I right? It's about sort of 4.5 metres. Councillor Pearson mentioned he didn't think it was sort of wide enough for two cars to pass.
Yes, it's about 4.9 between 4.3 and 4.4. A car generally is 1.8, a van maybe 2 meters. So yes, there is enough space for cars to pass obviously slowly and carefully, but yes.
The figures provided here suggested the width of a car a bit more than that, 2.1. I think my Astra is 2.1.
A standard parking space on the, on streets or parallel parking, it's 2 meters wide. So I'm guessing your car must be sticking out quite a bit. But yes, obviously a very large car might have difficulties, but again, the visibility is quite good from the start of the lane where the passing place is wider. So
okay.
If you have a large vehicle, you would probably wait.
Thank you. Has any assessment been made of the visibility displays when leaving these properties? Because obviously it's not just a question of being able to actually get out, it's a question of being able to get your bonnet out sufficiently to see safely. Now, bearing in mind, one of my cars has got an enormously long bonnet, I certainly couldn't do it, and there's nothing to stop these people having a similar sized car. I mean, are the visibility displays within the limits of a useful residential development?
The visibility displays we usually would require a 2x2 for a low speed lane like this, and that's drawn actually on this drawing. You can't see it because it's not zoomed in enough, but yes, they are drawn on.
Councillor Lomas and then Councillor Melly and Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question about this overdevelopment point, because I couldn't find it explained why this isn't overdevelopment in the reports. I may have missed it, however, but I couldn't find it explained why it isn't overdevelopment. And there are objections saying it is overdevelopment, and a reference to a previous application on the site across the back saying that would be overdevelopment. So can you explain to me why it's not overdevelopment?
If you look at 5.13, and it talks about subdividing the existing large rear garden into 3 smaller plots. It talks about how the dwelling would retain the largest garden, the modest rear courtyard garden, and a smaller wraparound garden. The gardens are considered to have adequate and appropriate outside amenity space. So they've talked about it in terms of amenity space and bin storage. So basically, it's been considered in terms of what it will provide in amenity space. Yeah, in terms of that, they've considered that it's acceptable. So given that, I mean, so I'd say, for example, if it was considered that it didn't have enough amenity space, that would be out of that, they'd consider that was out of character. I don't think they've specifically said out of character, but I think 5.13 covers that.
Sorry, I was asking about overdevelopment. So I understand it's addressed some of the points made around some of the other objections. I can't find anywhere in the report where it talks about overdevelopment, and I just don't understand what would overdevelopment be, and how do we know that this isn't it?
I think I don't think they have said that there's sufficient garden space, there's sufficient provision for bin and cycle space, and that there will be enough. That would be enough space. So that's not considered to be overdevelopment, because what they're saying is there's enough garden space, there's enough space for bins, even though they haven't said it wouldn't be overdevelopment. That's the kind of factors that you would look at in terms of overdevelopment. Is there enough garden space? Is there enough space for bins? Is it okay in terms of the character of the area? So that's what they've looked at, but they haven't said overdevelopment. But that's what we would assess as part of overdevelopment, everything that they've said in 5.13.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is that there isn't currently any lighting on the lane, and there isn't any proposed as part of this development. So has there been any assessment on like if there was lighting introduced to make it safer at night for pedestrians and cyclists, what the impact of that would be on the neighbouring residents and roosting bats and that sort of thing.
It wasn't felt necessary, given the size of the development, to request additional lighting. So we haven't looked at it in terms, we've made no request for any additional lighting for the site.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the existing parking arrangements, because obviously we're thinking about coming in and out of these new access points, but I think currently there is parking at the rear of the property, isn't there? So presumably, are they currently having to reverse out onto the lane anyway to get in and out, or what's the arrangement for them coming in and out as it is currently set up?
When I was at the site on Tuesday, it looked like they'd reversed in and then we'll be driving out. But yeah, they would. It was the same as there would be there now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just come back as well on the width of my car. So Google tells me the width without mirrors is 1.8. The width with mirrors is about 2.1. I think we probably do need the mirrors, but is there a...
The passing place is 4.3 to 4.5, so there is enough space, and obviously it's very low speed. You could move your mirrors if really it's necessary. It's sufficient. It's not a highway. If it was an adopted highway, it might require a bit more width, but this is a private lane.
Okay. Can't see any further questions. So if we're happy then to move into debate. Does anybody like to kick us off? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is like going back 30 odd years for me, because I was on the planning committees that refused the applications back in 1988 and 1989. The difference then was that we had the support of the highway surveyor, the county surveyor, who was the Office for Highways, and he more or less directed refusal on the grounds of highway safety. The difference between this application and that one, though, is the presence of the third dwelling, the new dwelling. Now, speaking personally, I've looked at this in enormous detail and I have no particular problem with the subdivision of number 29. I did back in 1988 and 1989, but I now accept that it's probably not unacceptable. What I do have a problem with is this third dwelling, which in my view would be an alien feature in the area. It's on a plot that is about half to a third of the size of any other plot in the area. It's of a design that is not in keeping with the other dwellings, which tend to be substantial properties on reasonably large plots. And I think it's just jammed in. So I am minded to propose refusal of the whole application. I would have perfectly happily supported the subdivision of number 29. I would not have objected to that. But since we have to consider the whole application, I think the presence of that third dwelling, it tips the balance for me towards refusal, and I will move refusal.
Thank you. Is anybody willing to second that? Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second that. I feel that the main argument, I suppose, in favour of approval is that there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development. But although this isn't a sustainable location, it's not a sustainable development unless it utilises that sustainable location. And I feel like this development disincentivises walking and cycling and doesn't adequately provide safe provision for that. So not only for the new development, but for the existing dwellings there, it makes that lane less safe for pedestrians and cyclists because of the increased level of traffic.
Okay. So any further debate, and then I'll come to Becky, I think. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure what grounds you would be refusing it on. I think that's my concern here. I can see, you know, I generally don't like backfilling of gardens if we can avoid it. But the pre-existing highways conditions, I don't see them changing significantly. There's already vehicles coming in and out of the rear of the property at 29, so we might add an extra extra one, possibly two cars coming in and out, but we're talking about a very low number of vehicles coming in and out. My biggest concern in terms of the development might be actually the proximity to number 25 of the dwelling at the rear. But I think, you know, the report suggests that an outbuilding could be built within the grounds of number 29 anyway, and I think some of the reason why they've designed it in the way that they have is to sort of mimic that. So there's certainly elements of it that I feel a bit uneasy about, but we always talk about, you know, the point of planning is that we have to apply the legislation, and we have to do that in a way that is defendable. And sometimes we don't like an application, but there's not a good reason for refusing it. So I'm not clear that you've made a case in terms of what the legislation is, why you think it would be defendable. So that's kind of where I am at the moment with it.
I think I dug it out. I've got my notes here. Policy D, one of the 2018 draft local plan was the one which I believe is to do with the character and appearance of the area.
Okay, Councillor Melling. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I was struggling a little bit with this application. I still don't quite appreciate, I don't think, this idea of whether it is or isn't overdevelopment. We're told there's enough amenity space for the 3 dwellings, but from what I can see, there's realistically only enough amenity space for dwelling 1, because most of the outside space for the other 2 dwellings is car parking space. And while that's important, I'm not sure where I'd hang my washing. I'm not sure where my kids might be able to run around. I'm not sure where my dog might be able to run around outside. We're not sure where I would be able to be outside. And in an area where we can see from the plans, there are big gardens. Other developments have been refused for overdevelopment of a plot that's approximately the same size at the back of this one, where they were only proposing 1 bungalow to be built. And this is essentially 3 dwellings on a plot of a similar size to that one, which would only have been 2. So I think I would support refusal on the grounds of overdevelopment. I don't think it's in character with the area. And similarly to Councillor Fisher, I think I would have found a way to support the subdivision of the house into 2 properties and extensions that supported that, but removing you know, over a half of the outside space from those 2 properties for me is overdevelopment.
Thank you. Can I suggest as well, Councillor Fisher, policy GP10, which is while subdivision of gardens may be acceptable, this is subject to the proviso that there would be no detriment to the character and amenity of the local environment. That might be.
I haven't spotted that one, but I'm very happy to put that one in as well.
Okay. Any further, Councillor Galvin?
Chairman, I've listened to the debate and it is a difficult one. I mean, if you go down Tadcaster Road from probably about this point all the way down, there are many lanes feeding into what one might call the backland development over the last 20, 30 years. And to be fair, I've not heard of anybody being injured or any motor accident at all. It is a difficult one, is this? And I'm struggling to make my decision as to which way I'm going to go. I think one of the things that muddies the water is, of course, this issue of ownership of the land and claim and counterclaim. As I understand it, Lord Mayor, as I understand it, Chairman, if evidence or law or courts decide that the ownership of this land is in the ownership of the gentleman who claims it to be his land, then at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether we say it can be a turning head or whatever, it ain't going to happen because he holds the key, if he owns the land, to turning head. Now, on the assumption that that might be the case, I guess it would have to come back for further consideration by the planning committee. In the event that that isn't the case, that the gentleman who claims to own land doesn't own the land, it seems to me that there is a reasonable room for vehicles to drive in and drive out, in essence, because they'll be able to turn. So I'm sort of bordering on the view that I don't understand, I can't accept the arguments for refusal, although I am concerned about it. And so I'm just hang fire as to where I'm going to sit, but I'm leaning towards approving permission, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher, saw your hand up.
Can I just clarify with our legal officers, the ownership of land in this situation is not a material planning consideration. I mean, I could apply for it to extend Councillor Galvin's house and get permission for it, but I would never be able to do it.
That's right.
He wouldn't give me permission.
That's right. I think we do get, yeah, I do think we get hung up sometimes on land ownership in planning, and it has absolutely no bearing whatsoever.
Any further debate? I can't see any. Yeah, I'll just say my opinion first. So completely agree with Councillor Fisher. The only other issue I guess I'd like to consider would be that of the access, because whilst we've talked about the effectively the reason being the detriment to the character and amenity of the local area, obviously that doesn't specifically reference the what I think is probably a not suitable access. I appreciate the inspector in 2005 didn't have any issues with that, but at the time he was looking at one additional dwelling rather than two. And so I'm just wondering whether that can be relied on, I guess, as something we shouldn't consider when the previous decision was effectively for a lower number. And I'd just like some advice on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no problem. Yes, it was for a lower number, and the inspector didn't raise any concerns. I think the advice that I have to give you at this point in time is that the fact that our highways officers don't object to the proposals. So that is where we stand as officers, that from a highways point of view, officers consider that it's unacceptable. Acceptable. So where the highways officer is fine with it, and that's where that's the advice that we're giving. If you want to go against that, that's fine. But it's also the fact that yes, the inspector did say that it wasn't. They didn't have any concerns from a highway point of view for what.
In terms of the weight given, I guess, to that inspector's decision.
Limited, because it's 2003 and you've had a change in the MPPF since then. But you can consider it, but I would only give it very limited weight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crawshaw, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I would caution against including access, because I think that you can make quite a strong argument that the access is improved over its existing condition. There's already access to the rear of what would be the second dwelling. So you've already potentially got vehicles coming down into that dwelling. So you're only looking at the third dwelling with a vehicle. And if you start saying that the access is dangerous and problematic, then it's presumably dangerous and problematic for number 1 and number 2 Cedar Court. You're not actually adding any, well, you're potentially adding 1, maybe 2 extra vehicles into it. So I'd argue it's an improved access as it's presented. So I would be a bit cautious of adding that as part of your refusal, if you see what I mean.
Okay. Councillor Fisher is the original proposer. Have you got a sort of?
I have to say, I think the access is an issue, but without the support of highways, I don't think it would be wise to include it, because the planning inspector might start to think that we're just trying to refuse it for the sake of refusing it. I think we should stick to grounds where I think we have a clear case. It's contrary to the character of the local area, I think we should stick to that. I don't think the design of the building in any way complements those around it, and the plot is too small. If remove that building from the application, if that wasn't there, I would have very happily given the rest of the application my support, but I can't support it with that in. So I would personally not put highways in, but if others wish to amend that, that's their choice.
Okay. Can't see any further debate, so I guess then if we could try it to Becky at that point to.
Okay, so your reason for refusal would be that the proposed, I'll call it the bungalow plot to the rear, would be out of character with the surrounding area, which would have an adverse impact on the character and amenity of the area. I will rewrite this, obviously. What I'd suggest is that I draft a full reason for refusal and send it to the chair and deputy chair for agreement, because I just would like to go away and make sure it's watertight in terms of that. But you didn't mention overdevelopment, but you did say that it was a small plot. I just need to clarify, do you want me to include overdevelopment, or do you want me to say due to the small plot size, it's out of character with the area, which...
Small plot size and the design of the building, which I think is very alien to the surrounding buildings. It's not in keeping with them at all.
Sighting and scale was also mentioned. Is that something that or are you wanting to just keep it on out of character of the area due to the small plot and the design of it, just solely on those? Right, perfect. I can draft something and send it to chair and deputy chair.
I guess the sighting scale is an element of the character.
Yes.
So I guess it comes in at that point.
Yes.
Okay, yep. So if we're happy then to finalise the wording with chair and vice chair, assume so. Okay. I think then we've reached the point we can take it to a vote.
Okay, so when I read your name, please indicate if you're for, against, or abstaining. Councillor Crawshaw.
Abstain.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Galvin.
I will abstain, Chair.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Melly.
For.
Councillor Perrott.
For.
Councillor Wardley.
For.
And Councillor Holden.
For. Okay. Sorry, was that? Yeah, no, sorry, the numbers there, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, that's refused with 2 abstentions.
2 abstentions. Okay, thank you. This is refused. Okay, if we could then just adjourn for 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everybody. If we can move on then to item 7, which is 62 Heworth Road. Becky, if you're able to.
Thank you, Chair. So it's an application for erection of one dwelling to the rear of number 62 Heworth Road and conversion of outbuilding to dwelling with a single-storey extension following the demolition of an attached garage. It's a resubmission, this one. You see the site outlined in red there to the rear of Heworth Road. You can see the existing outbuilding there that's to be converted in a garage. And this is the proposed block plan. Actually, this one here is better. So you can see this is not, you can see number 62 to the top of the slide. The conversion and the new building are outlined in brown. You can see the amenity space and the turning area for each of the property is in the grey area with the black and red vehicles. This is the proposed elevation of the existing, which is the existing cottage. And again, so this is the demolition. You can just see outlined in red there. That, oh, where's it gone? Is it still on the screen? No, I'm just not see it. Oh, okay, sorry. The access, you can see where they're going to demolish the wall there, outlined in red. And again, so this is the new build to the rear of the property there that you can see, single-storey pitched roof dwelling. So this is cottage building from the access lane that you can see there. And again, site from the access lane, you can see the site on the left-hand side there. And the site from Heworth Road with the access lane there. And this is the rear of 62 and 64 Heworth Road. This is where it's been subdivided already. And again, land at the rear. Just going to go back to the site plan, which was the best site. There we go. And there's no updates on this one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Can't see any, so Councillor Wardley just.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. It's the picture with the fence where you say it's already been divided. How close is the cottage extension going to be? If you see what I mean. Thank you.
It'll be right on that line there. Hang on, I forget that you've got them in your packs. So if you look at page 86 there, you can see that the proposed extension to the existing cottage there goes right the way along that boundary that you can see on page 96. Okay.
Councillor Lomas?
Thank you, Chair. Is there any outside space for number 62 other than the driveway? Am I misunderstanding it? No, there isn't. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can't see if there are any further questions there, so if we can move on then to public speakers. And our first speaker is Mr. Lee Vincent, who should be joining us via Zoom. If you're able to hear me, Mr. Vincent.
I am, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, are you there, Mr. Vincent?
I am, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, no, we can hear you now. Yep, and you'll know you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. But if you'd like to make a start in your own time.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Lee Vincent from Vincent and Brown, and we're the architects and agents for this application. I'll try to keep it brief. Would comment that we've worked positively with officers to bring this application to the positive recommendation before you today. The site sits in a predominantly residential, sustainable and accessible location, and the proposals retain and convert the existing buildings on site, adhering to heritage officers' feedback that they should be retained and conversion should be encouraged. The proposals are modest in nature. All new elements are single story, surrounded by an existing 2 metre high solid brick boundary wall. Any potential impact on adjoining properties has been mitigated, and we agree with officers that the proposal provides a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. The proposals will provide a net gain in biodiversity as required by legislation, adheres to the City of York Council's climate change policies CC1 and CC2, and incorporates electric vehicle charging in line with City of York Council's low emission strategy. Access is provided via a well-established private lane that serves multiple properties. A well-considered scheme with vehicle tracking has been put forward, demonstrating both pedestrians and vehicles can access the site safely, and highways officers have confirmed acceptability. Just to pick up on a point a councillor made just before I started speaking, the driveway for number 62 is actually in the front of the property, and parking is at the front of number 62. So the area that's actually marked driveway on the proposed site plan, it's incorrectly marked, and that is amenity space for number 62. So just to be clear, parking for number 62 is at the front of the property, and that's outlined in the officer's report. In design terms, the proposals are simple and use a palette of materials that fit well within their local setting and the wider conservation area. And we therefore politely request members approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Chair and members, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, and I'll just ask the committee if there are any questions. Not a minor demolition here, but
yeah, I can see that on
I can't see any questions from the committee. No, there don't seem to be any questions. So I'll thank you for your time, Mr. Vincent, and yeah, we should be able to continue watching on the council's YouTube channel. But thank you for your comments this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Next up, then we've got Mrs. Molly Newton, who's speaking in objection. She's also joining via Zoom. If you're there, Mrs. Newton.
Yep, I'm here.
Great, thank you. You'll know you've got 3 minutes to address the committee, so if you'd like to make a start in your own time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to start by making it clear that we don't object to the legitimate sort of development of the plot next to our garden, because we do think that's an important need in York to address the housing situation and the lack of housing. What we are concerned about is that this development doesn't really seem to tick a lot of the boxes that would be needed for a sort of affordable housing situation. And it also seems to supersede the biodiversity policy, as it is a priority habitat. We have bats nesting, we have a natural orchard, and we have a lot of wildlife in our back garden and in that area which is proposed for development. We also have an ancient and rare heritage plum tree, which has been repeatedly mislabeled as an unimportant and ordinary apple tree. It's not an ordinary apple tree, it's a rare heritage plum, which is right on the boundary and would be, we have had advice about this, and it would be likely that the roots of that tree would be damaged, even though they have moved the boundary wall slightly of their second new build. We don't understand why actually detailed ecology reports were not carried out, which is the policy of the council, and that is your own biodiversity action plan that hasn't been adhered to. Plus, in terms of our own outbuildings and our boundary walls, they would be significantly impacted when the demolition of that garage takes place. That is, we share the back wall with our own garage, and nobody has considered how that might impact on us. Just a correction in terms of that lane, it is not used by multiple residents, it's used only by the patrons of the pub, because the other buildings behind are unused currently, and the owners of 62 do not park at the front, they park at the back. It might be a parking space, but it isn't used as one. We also have concerns about the road. We are living opposite a primary school, and the increase of vehicles opposite the primary school does cause us a little bit of concern. We also haven't really been considered, we haven't been talked to, we haven't been asked about how it would impact in terms of our right to light or anything like that. And I think I do appreciate that these are better plans, but we would still like to have the biodiversity particularly, and the impact on our local area in terms of the heritage more carefully considered. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you're able to just hang on the line a minute, I'll just ask if the committee have any questions at this point. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for speaking to us this evening. I just wanted to clarify that the heritage plum tree, is that the tree that's just on the other side of the boundary wall that is to be retained, but in the report there's a concern about the roots and what have you? Is that the tree that you're talking about?
Yes,
yeah,
that's
thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask Becky, is that T1 on our plans on page 90?
It is
90.
T1.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just wondering, have you seen conditions 12 and 13 about a plan to enhance biodiversity and wildlife and ensuring breeding birds are protected and that sort of thing? Do you feel that that isn't adequate? Are there any other specifics that you feel should be?
I mean,
no, sorry, go ahead.
The trees that are there are going to be cut down, and there is no provision to replace them. So there are 3 trees in that plot which will be cut down, and there is nowhere on the plan does it show that they have been replaced in any way. Plus, if our tree is also damaged, which has bats nesting in it, that's another tree that's gone. We're living in a conservation area. I don't understand why that hasn't been taken into account. So I don't really see what the provision has been made in order to enhance the biodiversity when you're actually cutting trees down in a conservation area.
Okay, Councillor Melly again.
Thank you. And my other question was about what you're saying about construction and demolition near the boundary with your property. There's an informative, just to inform the applicant about the Control of Pollution Act, which is supposed to ensure that residents are not adversely affected by air pollution and noise. Does that, have you looked at the details of that? Does that provide any reassurance, or have you had any communications with the applicant about how those assurances will be implemented?
We've had no communication with the applicants at all. They haven't talked to us at any point, and our property is so connected to that property. We would have appreciated the opportunity to at least discuss any of this, and we haven't had any opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions at that point, so I'll just thank you for your time this evening, and similarly we have to carry on watching on the council's YouTube channel, but thank you very much. If we could move on then to Councillor Webb. You'll know the score, and if you want to make a start in your own time.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak on an item that's incredibly similar to the last item, so there's precedent been set tonight. Firstly, let me make it clear that this application lies within a conservation area, and that this specific conservation area is in place to maintain the village feel of Heworth Village. And as you know, that village feel is linked to low density housing and openness, not overdevelopment and infill. The NPPF states that in situations such as this, when conservation areas are involved, committees should resist inappropriate development on residential gardens. The NPPF also states that you should discount any notion of sustainability given that the amount of additional housing for York residents is likely to be negligible anyway, I don't think this is a consideration. This proposal represents a harm to a heritage asset and does not in any way enhance the local area, a further reason for refusal. The previous application was withdrawn only last year, and I'm sure that this was due to concerns that it would be refused due to the negative effect on the conservation area and residential amenity. And I don't think this scheme is that much different. Further to all this, there has been a lot of toing and froing regarding the ecology on site. Further bat survey work was required. For example, residents have stated that there is a rare plum tree at threat, and this does appear to be missing from the report. Surely this requires further investigation. Should this be approved, you will not only be letting existing residents down, but also future residents who will essentially be shoved into the corner of the pub car park. This proximity to a public house and the impact that that would have on future residents should be considered. There's a school opposite the entrance to the site. It's going to be a very tight exit and entrance onto an already congested and narrow road. It's an accident waiting to happen, and paragraph 111 of the MPPBF states that refusal can be made on safety grounds. Members, if this was up to me, I'd be giving serious thought to refusal. Finally, if you were minded to approve, I think that you have to consider the following things. 1, permitted development rights should be removed. 2, in condition 10, are you going to accept BREEAM very good? Why not push for more? 3, in condition 11, 1 charging point for 2 separate properties. Why not 1 each? 4, informative 2 talks about construction times being limited for resident amenity. Can this be upgraded to a condition and also include window washing for immediate neighbours for both the sides and the back of the application? And then finally, number 5, I would also suggest that the landscaping plan must include replacement trees. But first and foremost, please refuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. And Councillor Melly and then Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. Just on what you were saying about the conservation area being related to preserving that village feel and openness, I'm just wondering where the new development would be viewable from. Can it be seen from the highway? How many neighbouring properties can it be seen from? And if it can be seen from neighbouring properties, what is it viewable like from living spaces, like living room window, bedroom window?
I'll be honest, I haven't been in many residents' bedrooms recently, but what I would say is that it is surrounded by residential properties. So I imagine that the immediate residents would be able to see that property. Is it viewable from the road? I know that the original application didn't come to a decision, and I think that was probably because that application was visible from the road, but I couldn't say for definite about this one as well.
Okay. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you help us at all with the understanding sort of the things that are around it? So are I'm making an assumption that at the rear of the pub there is something, there's a big space. Is that green space? Is it car park space? What is it? And we understand from the previous public speaker that on the other side of the plot then there is gardens, but if you can help us understand what's around it, because I wasn't able to go on the site visit.
So if you were to look at it from above and you were to imagine a triangular shape, you've got the East Parade forming one side of that triangle, Heworth Road forming the other long side of that triangle, all the way down to Heworth Green. This application is probably in the very tight apex corner of that triangle. There is a pub car park adjacent to this development, and the access, I know in the last application we talked quite a lot about tight access, and that access is jointly used by the pub and this potential application. As well as that, Heworth Road is it's quite a narrow road. It is incredibly well used because it leads directly onto Malton Road, and there is a primary school across the road from that it's a very small primary school that literally comes straight onto the pavement. So actually, for those reasons as well, I think that is quite a concern. All the properties, it is part of a conservation area. So both the properties on the Heworth Road side and the East Parade side are the main features of this conservation area. And this sits basically right in the middle.
Thank you.
Okay, I can't see any further questions. So thank you for your time this evening, and we'll take your comments into account. If we can move then into any further questions for officers, Councillor Crawshaw.
Just wondered, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if you could just clarify, I know we talk about this quite often, but the status of the trees, I'd understood that effectively any tree in a conservation area is equivalent to being a TPO tree. Perhaps I've misunderstood that, but there doesn't seem to be any requirement to replace the 3 felled trees. What was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, you're right. They are offered a level of protection so you have to apply if you want to do works to create a tree in a conservation area. I'm just going to double check exactly, because the landscape architect was consulted, and she's actually said none of the trees are worthy of a tree preservation order. So given that, that may be why there hasn't been a request for replacement trees. I'd also say, given the size of the site, you might not be able to get any form of substantial trees in there, given if you look at the plot at the back, there's not a lot of room to be putting a large tree in there, but there's no reason why, if members felt that they wanted, so you could condition replacement trees, but they'd have to, I wouldn't suggest that there would be able to be a particular big species given the size of the plot.
Just to clarify that, because I guess that's the bit that I'd read in the report, not worthy of a TPO, which, you know, fair enough, there might be really poor trees, but because they're in a conservation area, do we not treat them as if they're TPO'd? Anyway, I thought that was kind of the way it worked with conservation areas.
It's not exactly the same, but yeah, but I think you've got to look at it on this site and whether or not replacement of that number of trees is acceptable on this site, given that you're about to approve, well, if the recommendation is to approve. I just don't think that this site could have potentially accommodate the trees that are being replaced. To put extra trees on there, does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
that may be why
that
will be why the recommendation is what it is. But yeah, you are right in what you say.
Councillor Galvin, and then
Chair, looking at I think there are 3 photographs of this, well, 4 in essence. Can't see any trees. I don't know, I've got a bit of muck on my glasses, but looking at the one on page 97, there's a lot of weeds and rubbish. There's a tree the other side of the wall. I wonder whether that's a plum tree. But I can't see any actual trees on this site at all. Am I missing something? Sorry?
If you look on page 90, there is T1, T2, T3 and T4. I don't think you can see them very well on these photos, in all fairness. Hang on, if you look on 97, you can see them there. They're not very clear on the photos, unfortunately, but they are there.
okay, Councillor Parrott, and then
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask about the reasonableness of conditioning sort of protective measures for the tree that lies outside the boundary if it has been misidentified as an apple tree but is actually a rare heritage tree? Is there anything that we could condition to try and sort of prevent any damage happening during construction.
Yeah, we can do root protection measures and other such. I'm just checking whether or not we've actually conditioned that already. But yeah, we can condition that if need be. That's not unreasonable to request that if we haven't put it on.
Okay. Councillor Melly, I think, was next.
Thanks, Chair. My question's actually been asked and answered already.
Councillor Wardley.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm not sure about this question, but is there any way we can get the trees put somewhere, you know, new trees put somewhere else?
You mean outside of the application site?
Yeah, like on council land, just to, so we don't lose the trees from the area, so.
It would,
no,
it would be difficult. I think we'd probably need to have a discussion with the applicant to whether or not they would consider doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't see any further questions, so if we're happy then to move to debate. Who would like to start? Nobody. Councillor Perrott.
Thanks, Chair. It is very similar, isn't it, in terms of development when we compare it to the previous application that we've seen. It's an awful lot of property that's going to be placed on a site that does have narrow access, that has similar sort of issues on the highway for cars entering and exiting the site. I've got concerns because, as people have mentioned, there's not been enough thought given to the ecology. So I was glad to hear that we could request protection measures if that tree has been misidentified. It is disappointing if the trees within the conservation area couldn't be replaced, if they do normally have that TPO type level for them, even if they're not in great condition. It does really add to the character of the area in Heworth. Yeah, I think that's probably my starter on the conversation. Otherwise, is it possible for us to put in any conditions? I know some were mentioned by Councillor Webb about construction. Obviously, it is surrounded by neighbouring properties. There is going to be public house there that will have people coming in and out of who, you know, may not necessarily be paying as much attention to traffic if given the nature of recreation that's undertaken there. So is it possible for us to put any more stringent conditions in around looking after neighbour amenity while the construction work's undertaken?
We wouldn't normally put a condition on for this size of development, but if members considered it necessary, you can request it. It's not an unreasonable thing to do.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. I share the concerns about ecology and conservation, and I'm concerned that the development as shown in the plans could cause damage to a tree worthy of a TPO or some sort of protection, and it might not be possible to mitigate against that. It might just be inherent in the development as applied for. But what I'm not sure is whether we can give enough weight to that for it to be worthy of refusal. I'm not sure yet.
Could that be conditioned in such a way that the development couldn't happen without, you know, before that was looked at? Or? Sorry, who? Councillor Crawshaw. I was trying to remember.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to shove us off the fence, I think. I think that if we're going to be consistent, there are far stronger grounds for refusing this on the impact on the wider conservation area, policy GP10, the detrimental impact to the character and amenity of the local environment. I think if we've just refused an application in Haxby on the basis of it divvying up a back garden where other back gardens are not divvied up, well, quite clearly from the plans that you can see here, the backs of all of these houses are not divvied up. So I think that you know, if we're going to refuse one, we have to refuse another. Policy GP10, it seems to be a fairly strong grounds. I think there was also a policy D1, but I can't find it in the papers. That's why I was flicking through. So if there is also an additional policy in there that we can add to it to add weight, I think that we should. I think that there are concerns around access, but I wouldn't, in the same way that I wouldn't particularly have wanted to reference them in the previous one, I wouldn't say that they were strong enough on this. But I do think that there is perhaps something about the ecology as well, because it does concern me that if this is a conservation area with you know, potentially important habitat in the back, if we haven't had a full ecology report on it, that is a bit of concern. But I would, on the basis of being consistent, I think I'm happy to propose refusal on the grounds of breaching or not meeting the test of GP10.
Thank you. Anybody willing to second that? Councillor Lomas?
Yes, Chair, I was just going to make virtually an identical proposal on very, very similar grounds, but I think Councillor Crawshaw's probably said it better than me.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. There are some aspects of this that I actually think are beneficial. I think what they have done is they've over-egged it. I'm concerned that it doesn't leave sufficient to me space for number 62, particularly at the rear. I don't think there's sufficient room for, you know, potential playing out and such like there in any kind of constructive way. I feel if they'd given a little bit more land to the back of 62 and given the conversion of the outbuilding the rest of the garden, I think that would have actually probably just about been acceptable. But we have to consider the application that's here. Clearly, I'd like to see that outbuilding brought back into residential development. I think it would be a good use of a probably 19th century outbuilding. But on balance, I don't think this ticks enough boxes for me to support it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments? Can't see any, so are you able to summarise?
Can I just ask for clarification, Councillor Crawshaw? Did you want the lack of information on ecology as a reason for refusal or not? I wasn't sure where you'd got to with it. Because I mean, if you did, I would suggest it would be on lack of information on the impact, but I would say that the ecologist hasn't necessarily objected to it on that grounds.
I think what I'm concerned about is if we have misidentified a tree, albeit outside of the boundary of the application site, and that there are then concerns being raised about the potential loss of habitat and the lack of an ecology report. It was just, that in itself wouldn't be grounds for refusal. I absolutely accept that. So I would like some reference to that if that's possible to do within a refusal. But the main principal grounds for the refusal are the GP10 subdivision of the garden and the conservation area, and not meeting the character of the conservation area.
Right, so I think we'd probably need to do it. I'll say what I've drafted for your first reason. So the proposed dwellings, due to their size, scale and position, are considered to be out of character with the surrounding area and conservation area, and also do not provide adequate amenity space, contrary to D1 and the National Planning Policy Framework. Is that along the grounds that you were wanting? I'll word it properly and
policy
send it.
D1, yeah.
Yeah. And then the second one would be around the impact the proposal would have on there's a lack of information on the impact the proposal would have on the tree and any associated ecology impacts of the proposal on that tree and surrounding area.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take it at that. Yeah. I did mention GP10 as well. I don't know whether D1 supersedes it, or because that's from the 2005.
GP10 is from the 2005 local plan, so I don't really want to rely on that one.
Sure.
I want to rely on our current policies and the MPPF, because that puts us in a stronger position for defending it. So yeah, that's your two reasons for refusal that I'll draft in full. I'll research them a bit further and then I'll send them to the chair and deputy chair for final agreement, if that's okay.
Okay. Assume that's okay. Okay, I can't see any further debate, so if we're happy then to move to the vote.
Okay, when I say your name, please indicate if you're for, against, or abstaining. So Councillor Crawshaw.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Galvin.
Against.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Melly.
For.
Councillor Perrott.
For.
Councillor Wardby.
For.
And Councillor Hollier.
For.
Okay, so that is 1 against and rejected.
Okay, thank you. So that is refused. Sorry, Councillor Melly.
I just wanted to ask before we end the meeting, just for clarification on which minutes were approved at the start of the meeting. Because I think you mentioned that there were 2, but I've only seen 1, and agenda item 2 on the agenda only mentions the meeting held on 8th of July.
I had on my desk the 10th of June 2021 and the 8th of July. So I think we did those ones first. Didn't see an issue with those ones. There was a slight issue with these ones.
It's just that they're not in the papers provided and not on the agenda.
Okay. I can't remember if we approved the 10th of June ones at the 8th of July meeting, but I assume we can just, if not, we can add the 10th of June ones into the next meeting and approve them then. Councillor Lomas?
If you look at the minutes of the 8th of July meeting, which are in the packs, you'll see that you approved the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of May. And then you went on to approve the 10th of June ones, subject to the addition of the below text after the final bullet point. So if that's been added, then surely you can sign them.
Okay, so that's what we did, is it? So did we add that? Yeah, we can clarify that in the next meeting, I think. Thank you for raising it. Okay, so the meeting's closed.